with him on Slack as well. So
we are live.
we are live. Okay. All right.
Right. I think Deepak, we can start.
All right. So, okay, let's get started. I just pull up the. All right. So yeah, hi, welcome everyone to a panel discussion on the Agentic AI platform for finance and accounting. My name is Deepak. Brian, Lynn, and Niyati are our panelists. I will moderate and anchor the session. This will be a 60-minute session, 40 minutes for discussion, and a 20-minute Q&A session at the end. Right. So let me start by introducing our speakers. I'll go with Brian first. Who's here. Brian is a financial planning and analysis expert with 30 plus years of experience in financial leadership, consulting, and analysis. He combines extensive industry expertise with a passion for using technology to enhance financial decision making. He loves engaging with extensive networks to provide relevant insights, tailored learning, and custom tools and solutions with a true bottom line impact. So that's Brian for you. Welcome, Brian. Great to have you here.
Pleasure.
Yeah. We have Lynn, who might join us shortly. She's an entrepreneurial CFO with a strong background in international transactions and operations, specializing in driving significant growth and turnarounds for VC/PE-backed companies. With expertise in financial planning, analysis, and strategy, Lynn has successfully managed public and private equity financings, joint ventures, M&A, and debt and lease financing. Lynn excels in building finance department infrastructures, implementing ERP systems, and aligning HR policies with strategic goals. So we'll wait for her to join. She's probably joining anytime as we speak. And lastly, we have Niyati. Niyati has more than 11 years of experience at Adobe with over 40 patents and 50 publications. She has a PhD in machine learning from the University of Maryland in the field of NLP and computer vision. So welcome, Niyati. Great to have you here on the discussion.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Deepak, for that. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, hello everyone in the audience, and the agenda for the discussion today goes like this. We'll have an introduction to Agentic AI and its impact on the finance and accounting industry. Right. Discover the key opportunities Agentic AI brings, from improving accuracy and reducing manual tasks to unlocking new efficiencies across financial operations. Right. Then we have the exploring real-world examples, so to speak, and specific use cases where Agentic AI is already making an impact, such as automating invoice processing, expense management, financial reporting, and so on. We'll also dive into the Agentic AI's potential capabilities, including how it can adapt to various financial workflows, integrate with existing systems, and enhance decision-making. And lastly, we'll learn how to implement Agentic AI. The adoption of AI, a roadmap for it, and the ROI organizations can expect, both in the short and long term. So let's get started. My first question is to you, Brian. Can you help us walk through the key processes in F&A, and where do you see a scope for Agentic AI?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. Hello to the audience. It's great to speak to folks all over the world at one time. That's the great thing about the technologies that we have today. And just thank you, Deepak. Also, feel free, Deepak, correct me if I'm wrong, feel free to send your questions in, or is it just holding till the end? Because again, okay, yeah, because I'm someone love answering the questions. So
right.
As long as I'm not breaking any rules, feel free to send your message and your questions in.
No rules. Yeah, please send in the questions session progresses.
Well, as we were talking and thinking about, what's happening, with AI, and I mean, a little bit of just kind of background as I'm talking to FP&A professionals and finance professionals and CFOs every day. I think we're at a very interesting point, and it'd be interesting to get others' thoughts too. But I think we're actually at an inflection point. Is that I think we've gotten to the point. I think ChatGPT-4 was introduced 2 years ago, and I think we've gotten to the point where it's no longer is this going to be a fad or not. Is that we're beginning to see more and more uptake. So the way I thought I would address is just starting with working capital management. I mean, that's just what every office of finance is fighting for. The way I kind of put it is, managing business without understanding working capital is like attempting to navigate a maze blindfolded, right? Without the right guidance, your risk gets lost and missing valuable opportunities. And I think what's really exciting is, AI is really revolutionizing accounts payable and receivable management by really automating these routine tasks and improving accuracy and optimizing cash flow. And why I think we're in such a transitional period, and I would freely put myself way off the curve as a finance person who knows somewhat about technology, is we've been having this battle for 30 years about trying to really leverage our finance teams out of the world of 80% data acquisition, verification, and reconciliation. And it's never been a challenge that we don't have really bright, smart people. It's that we've been restricted by technology. And so, as I said, we can go back to 30 years ago to hard copies of CFO magazines, and CFOs would say, my people spend 80% of their time on acquisition, verification, and reconciliation. And I would say even up until about 3 or 4 years ago, actually, I started seeing the number go higher, which is about the worst thing you could see, where you're already seeing 85% are spending their time. I think part of it is the data acquisition battle has been conquered, in the sense that 20 years ago, a completely acceptable answer to a question that was data related was, I don't know, because the data actually couldn't be acquired, it cost too much to acquire, or by the time you got it, it just wasn't valuable anymore. And I think now we're in a world where, from a data acquisition perspective, data is basically immediate, free, and unlimited. But that in and of itself creates problems. So that might actually be where people started having challenges, was just the volume of data coming in. And what we're learning is, obviously, you just can't keep throwing people at a problem when you're talking about, I always love learning new words, brontobytes of data, brontobyte being 10 to the 27th power. So what I'm thinking about, when we're talking about working capital management is, when we think about AI, it really enhances operational efficiency by reducing manual effort, minimizing errors, speeding up the processes. We have the additional benefit of predictive insights from AI. What's great about that is it improves decision making, enables smarter financial strategies, proactive problem solving. So AI is rapidly transforming the landscape of AP and AR management in finance, driving a surge of investment into agentic AI technologies, which of course we'll dive deeper into. And what I think is interesting is we're seeing from recent studies revealed that finance professionals are increasingly turning to AI to automate these routine tasks, improving accuracy and accelerating decision-making processes in managing cash flow, payments, and receivables. And certainly can add on to that, but at this point, I'll hand it over to my fellow panelists.
Yeah, maybe a question from my end as well. Like, you talked about all these different finance processes, right? Maybe can you give us an example of any of them and help understand why these agentic AI things can be really useful? What's the potential? Maybe any one of them, and just break it down further.
Sure. So, keeping it a pretty high level, but let me just share two just right off the top. So one is a construction company that I work with, and they're actually using AI for payment authorization. And so when an invoice is submitted, the system cross-checks against delivery records and purchase agreements. The payments are authorized only if all the criteria are met. So this ensures accuracy, prevents duplicate payments, maintains strong vendor relationships through consistent and reliable transactions. And then the second one, hopefully it's useful. So this is an energy company that I work with. they're leveraging AI to route invoices based on thresholds. So, for example, invoices that exceed a specific limit are sent directly to senior management for approval. So, this predefined routing eliminates errors in manual assignments, accelerates processing time, ensures policy compliance, and streamlining the entire workflow.
Got it. Yeah.
Right. So essentially, what you touched upon, Brian, were the manual sort of processes across AP as an example. But I think are there any analytical use cases where you see some potential for agentic AI to be adopted? Do you think?
Sure. So, what I'm thinking is getting maybe a wee bit ahead of ourselves, but to me, there's really three opportunities if we kind of think upscale. So it's predictive and prescriptive analytics, real-time decision making, and sorry, just pausing on the third for a second here. Is enhanced forecast accuracy. So if I dive into those, for example, one of the most transformational aspects of AI in FP&A is the move from providing diagnostic and descriptive analytics to predictive and prescriptive and hopefully eventually cognitive. And so one of the challenges that we've had is that in traditional FP&A, financial planning and analysis, professionals analyze past data to understand historical performance and create then forecasts. However, the great thing was AI allows organizations to take this step further by providing predictive models that are not only forecast potential outcomes based on historical data, but also adapt new trends and what's really key, in real time. So what's happening is, again, it's just the speed. I mean, so one of the things that I always talk about is that, as anytime you're talking about new technology, there's always concern. What does this mean to me? And what I like to share is that, AI is not going to replace people. People that use AI are going to replace people that don't use AI. And it's a tool that we can utilize to just do the work that, I joke, and again, in the Office of Finance, but I'm a little more focused on FP&A. And it's, I kind of will say, well, we're already working 26 hours a day, 8 days a week, 60 weeks a year. And the variable that we can't create on our own is time. So we have to just be more efficient. And if we're bogged down in manual tasks, really what we're doing is we're putting low IQ activities on the plates of high IQ people. And I think what we need to focus on, AI is a tool, but it's really this, if I can create the picture for you, is that you almost want to have a human on one side and the bot on the other side, and realizing that it's really complementary, right? Is that we're going to leverage what AI is great at. Again, it's consuming mass amounts of data and being able to utilize it in a much quicker pace than a human ever could. But that's where, obviously there are other things that can come along. But again, at the end of the day, it's a human that's making a decision. Again, attempt at humor as someone who speaks a lot. We're not turning on Skynet, if you're familiar with the Terminator, right? And just hoping it doesn't become self-aware. But it's the idea that this is just a tool that actually if it makes sense, creates time so that we can focus on those activities that are really going to help the organization meet its goals. And those activities that are much better suited for leveraging technology will finally, again, in my career, 30 years, finally be moved off the plates. Plus, one of the things that we continue to see is just job satisfaction, right? Mm-hmm. If we free people up to do more interesting work, then their output and the quality of the output only increases. And so, leveraging what I think is honestly the industrial revolution in real time. And then again, I freely admit I'm way out the curve, but I think that's what we're facing. So, thinking about it, one of the challenges that we have is we're operating in a world of very high VUCA. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Thankfully, it's lower than where we were 3 and 4 years ago, but it's still high. no one believes the world's going to be calmer and less complex in the future. So the way I kind of put it is, in a rapidly changing business environment, agility is the key to staying competitive. So AI offers a significant advantage in enabling real-time decision making by continuously analyzing data streams and generating insights instantly. So for FP&A, we typically relied on quarterly and annual reviews, and we struggled to keep up with the fast-paced demands of today's business world. So when I'm working with all these different companies, what I'm always trying to address is, from a data perspective, what are the three things that if you knew tomorrow that you don't know today could fundamentally change how the company's operating?
Great. Thanks, Brian. That's quite a few in-depth insights there. So thanks for that. I'll move on to our next section. And Niyati, I think this question would be relevant to you. Can you tell us what is agentic AI in the first place, right? So let's start there.
Sure. So I'll actually go back to some terms that Brian was using, right? We are talking about data. We are talking about predictive and prescriptive analytics, which is all based on data. And then we are at this stage where technology has existed and we are able to kind of put in rules and automation and end-to-end workflows where we are reducing extremely repetitive tasks. Whether people are using them is a secondary problem, but from a technology perspective, those kind of machine learning or traditional machine learning has existed. What Coming back to your question, what is this big deal or what is this agentic AI about? So, agentic AI is about creating a companion to the user. But this companion is not only a companion that is crunching data and throwing out results, but it is some it's a piece of technology or models which can help do basic human thinking, which is perception. So this agent has, or these AI agents have the ability to gather and process data from various different sources. So let's say we have invoices and we have the ERP. So structured, unstructured, all of that together and put it in one place and show it out. So start perceiving, and when we perceive things, so when I look at something and I perceive it, I understand the data, I don't memorize it, and I try to kind of recognize things, and that's what these agents are also doing. So in the case of, again, finance, um, I can read from the invoice and find the vendor in the ERP. So I'm starting to recognize that information. The second thing is these agentic models start reasoning. So they can tell us that what's exactly happening. So there is a lot of the chatbots or the closed kind of closed models who are meant to just talk and not necessarily process data and not necessarily understand the data, will not be able to reason and tell you why you should be doing something or why a certain output is being shown on your whatever software. So agentic AI allows you to, I mean, incorporates this notion of reasoning. Uh, then fine, I know what the recognition is. I'm recognizing thing. I'm able to justify what the way, and then I need to be able to act. So these AI agents do the action. Now, for us, let's say invoice processing, the action may be looking at the document and saying whether it's an invoice or not, and deciding whether it should be further given to the AP or not, or further processing the line items, doing the matching, should I do the post or not. So all of those things become actions, but they are driven by the fact that the agentic platform or the agent itself has deep understanding, that is recognition and reasoning capability along with the acting capability. A little bit of traditional ML was more just action oriented as well. So memorize and act. So that's where uh, several folks had questions on, is this only going to be dependent on data, or there is more knowledge, right? And then finally, I keep doing this again and again. Like a human, these agents learn. So based on the companion, which is the user here, actual human, it will say, okay, the user liked what I showed and they approved my action, or they reject it. These agents learn. So this whole paradigm of agentic AI, which is fairly new, actually, as the foundations of that is fairly new and recent, is trying to mimic the thinking ability of a human. And they are now, if when we train them well on the right data and with the right kind of methodologies, they're doing a very, very, very great, like good job. And that's where all these problems Brian is talking about is something we can now solve with cool AI. So yeah, hope that
Awesome.
helps.
Yeah, that definitely helps. It's super insightful, a bit technical, but yes, it's you've explained it pretty nicely. Related to what you just said, there's a question in the comment section from one of our uh, audience. How is agentic AI different from chatbots, or is it the same thing?
So that's a great question. So the way I map to it is that chatbots know how to talk. So chatbots learned how to speak language and respond and do conversations with humans. They may or may not understand the data behind it, behind, let's say, an application that's asked. So let's say I come and ask, I upload a contract and say, find me all the payment terms within the contract. The chatbot may or may not be able to go and say whether they are the payment terms, whether they are right. It may be able to point me to, hey, this line looks like a payment term. As against that, your AI, agentic AI platform or a AI agent will be able to say, hey, these are the payment terms. It means say 30 days from the invoice date. And in your context, 30 days from invoice dates means actually 30th of next month. So again, coming back to what I was saying earlier, reasoning capability, understanding capability, ability to tie back data and things like that are your agents. Chatbot knows how to read stuff, it knows how to talk, and but it still technically doesn't know what to do with the content and how to process it unless it's extremely well implemented and kind of engineered. So agents by design need to know that. I can definitely have a chatbot which is AI agent, right? So all the chatbots that all of us build now as in order to help people converse will be agentic AI chatbots. So there's a paradigm shift that we are seeing in the industry here as well. Yeah.
And then I would just say that's interesting because again, as I kind of prepared a few, high level, case studies. So for example, one as we were just chatting, and that's what's fun about having a discussion, right? Is so it's a wholesale distributor, and so they actually implemented an AI chat box to handle routine supplier inquiries like shipment tracking. And so the
Mhm.
idea is the bot instantly updates suppliers on order status, saving time for both parties. So the suppliers appreciate the quick response, leading to improved satisfaction, stronger partnerships with the distributor. I don't know how that fits into how you think about it.
Yeah, so the way I would map to that is that my all these AI agents or the platform itself will have access to the supplier communication, the actual data as to how goods are going from here and there, all of that, and let's say AP health or working capital related information. So these agents will be able to decipher things like you just said that hey, this vendor may be someone whom you want to keep happy because they are giving us a lot of discounts and we are frequently using them. So whitelisting, blacklisting, all of those things. Um, Ideally, we want these agents to go all the way up to saying that, hello, this is the communication. I would like to send buyers, just approve it. So some such human in the loop workflows will be really useful. So,
And I'm also going to take, if I can, take advantage of having an expert like you here. So when you were talking about angelic AI from a
mhm.
finance perspective, this is how I present it. So great, an opportunity to correct and improve. So the way I put it is angelic AI systems are designed for autonomous, contact-aware decision making. In enhance these procedures by automating repetitive tasks, flagging discrepancies, and generating predictive insights. This approach reduces errors, speeds up workflows, and allows finance teams to focus on strategic tasks. In
Mhm.
addition, as you were saying, AI continuously learns and adapts to evolving data patterns, providing finance teams with up to date insights and enabling more agile responses to financial challenges. So, again, the result being businesses gain improved transparency, optimize cash flow, strengthen relationships again with their vendors and their clients alike. How do you like that description?
I do, and I think I want to. go back to some of the comments I'm seeing here in the chat. So maybe I'll address one question and then consolidate a few comments because that'll lead us nicely into our next section. There's a question that says AI and ML have been mature for a while. Why are there so many use cases emerging only after LLMs? Couldn't earlier AI solve these problems? That's a great question, and the reality is that um, when LLMs were introduced, so LLMs are nothing but what is known as a transformer decoder. They the capability of kind of having that amount of compute, availability of that amount of data, and kind of unlocking the math to have that data and content understood, especially language understood by machine learning models, was not possible earlier. So a GPT-4 kind of a thing was a wow moment in this language understanding space, and then no one is stopping. So the moving from just a GPT-4 or a large language model to vision models to agentic AI now, reasoning capabilities, thinking capabilities, all of that is evolving very, very, very quickly. So that's the improvement in technology actually came in because of the availability of compute data and kind of the unlocking of the math part that the kind of community was able to do about 2 years ago. So this is essentially for Krishnapal. It's actually that AI wasn't able to understand that data that well, and that much amount of both data and compute did not exist earlier. So maybe Deepak, I'll hand over to you later. But there's a bunch of questions which are
Sure.
around the kind. Can these agents help for, let's say, budget planning? Can these agents help for, I saw one more process somewhere. So, I mean, maybe Brian and I, you can help Brian and I get into a couple of questions where we just nail down. Brian talks
Sure.
about these pieces and I can bring in the agentic parts, maybe a couple of these key finance processes.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think moving on, like from these, from the question from Krishnapal, right? And you're touching upon the underlying technology here, right? So I think that's something that probably can elaborate, but the rest of the questions are essentially around use cases, right? Can we have such agents for budget planning, or users will need to do all the work, things like that. So those are mostly, I think, use cases which I think Brian
Yeah,
can
there's
sort of
one
touch
on
upon.
tax as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
tax.
tax as well. Yeah,
I mean, the way I would look at it, and again, this is what's fun about having people for anything. I mean, again, in a sense, it's again, how I look at it, it's an electronic employee, right? And so whatever process we're working on whatever use case you're presenting from, if a human is doing it today, what we're looking at least at the first level, is all those tasks that are tied to it, that it would just be much more efficient to leverage AI to do. So there's no limitation. So again, like I said, one of the things I love about getting invited to like really intelligent conversations like this is I learn a lot, and plus it's a check. So I always reserve the right to be smarter tomorrow than today. And so, the idea is, whatever the process, all right, and it's all about process, whatever the process that we're using, as long as it's mappable and our data is good, right? So we've got good master data management, we can leverage AI. I mean, so again, it's just, a tool to let us do these things. But at the end of the day, the type of budgeting you do, well, that's going to be decided by management. But as far as the acquisition of the data, looking for trends, because one of the things that we've learned is, humans are fantastic at finding trends they're looking for, and absolutely terrible at finding trends they're not. And so that's one of the beauties that we have with AI, is going through just, again, brontobytes of data to just identifying trends that a human just would never pick up. And so, again, so whether you're talking about from a forecasting perspective, where here's a way that we can improve accuracy, whether we're talking about a budgeting perspective, where if you're working on a 90-day budget, we probably can get it down to 60, just throwing some numbers out there. Again, from a planning perspective, and we're looking at like from a strat planning perspective, the fact that we can run so many different scenarios, that again, we were limited again by time, money, and resources. Again, it is just again, I don't know if you would agree with the term. I look at AI as a time multiplier, right? It just allows me to do so much more with so much data because that's where its strength lies. And so I haven't come across, I mean, even if you start talking, and again, you can map all these things out about, when we think about use cases, one of the things that we're looking about is feasibility versus value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, if it, anytime we build that matrix, right, it's right. Well, if it's high effort and low return, well, we don't focus on that. But if we're looking at the opportunity, I mean, I kind of think about it. If you take it from the context of, if you look at let's call it effort versus return, right? There
Mm.
are things today that would have very high return, but they take a tremendous amount of effort to get to. And so that kind of goes back to what are the
Yeah.
three things you want to know about your data? This is where agentic AI can really help, right? Because it can, again, basically solve the data problem so much faster that you're able to then get insights. So even when you look at something like, again, we can talk about, reading emails, right? I do that in
Yeah.
ChatGPT, right?
So
That's
that's
one end of the spectrum.
so I want
Two,
to take that cue, and what I'm thinking is, why don't both of us walk through, let's say, P2P.
mhm,
So let's say from reading email to all the key steps, and what are the couple of or a top 3 or 4 functions in P2P that you see as where these agentic AI things will help, and then I can complement saying
sure.
what agents do I see us building over there. So.
Absolutely. So, one point, is just, coming out of all of that, is doing the cash flow forecasting, right?
Mhm.
Is AI driven predictive models for more accurate forecast. So I don't know if you want me to like come up with one and then you respond to it, or I come up with a couple and
No, so what I'm thinking is, let's break that down even further, right? So
okay,
let's say cash cash outflow forecasting.
right.
So in order to do that, what all would we need to do in the process, or let's say how is that process done today? Why don't you tell that, and then let's see what AI agents can do there.
Sure. So, I mean, again, it's a tremendously manual process that most people feel even and they're terrible at it, right?
Hmm.
Is because it's just, we think about, again, maybe I'm looking at it this way. So, you're just starting with data entry and and verification, right? Is, that to me is that first step. Then we're looking at, creating some kind of payment reminders that we then need to actually make the payments. Then there's invoice matching. Again, there's cash flow forecasting, and then I say, there's fraud detection, right? These are all things that we're spending time on and not in any kind of efficient way. So
Got it.
did that give
Yeah.
you enough to run with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. You talked about invoice matching, right? So now for a human to even get to invoice matching, that human would go find the invoice, then read the invoice, go find the purchase order, go find the GRN, go find the vendor, go find the line items, do the matching. If it doesn't match, write to the vendor, or wait for the goods to actually come in, then do the matching, then go manually find the GL code, post, and then try to do the posting, just for the matching piece. Now along this way, they will also be looking at whether there are duplicates, whether the vendor is valid, whether it's a fake vendor or not. They will look at if I am being over invoiced. They look at if, let's say, it was a closed PO and or a blanket PO, and matching will differ. They'll also look at what to match, what not to match. Is it a agreed upon payment term, or does that need renegotiation? All of those things. Now, imagine you had these um, AI agents and co-pilots. Let's say a co-pilot or an AI agent which said, "I'll go find the invoice for you from your mailbox," and then exactly pull out the right document without any human looking at it. So let just a document understanding and a classification, or finance document understanding classification agent. So this agent goes and pulls the information, which is what is relevant to the AP and what is not relevant to the AP. So it can bring in the POs, the GRNs, all of that. Then you have an AI agent that does the extraction and understanding of all this unstructured data, right? The PO might be sitting in the ERP, whereas the invoice is coming from the mailbox. There has to be this sophisticated thing that understands everything that's in the invoice, pulls it out, and then our, let's say, validation agent can go in and find whether all the information within your invoice is correct. Now, what do I mean by that? It actually means this agent has the capability of understanding your ERP and the master data or the vendor master. It has the capability of understanding all the invoices I may have seen in the past to pull out duplicates. It obviously understands fake. So let's say if that organization doesn't exist, then it's probably a fake and you want to flag it. It also will have a tax verification agent, which helps this guy, right? So this agent will say, "Hello, you have been. This is the sender address. This is the receiver address. This is the tax exempt certificate or the lack of it. This is the good. This is the line item." Using that, that agent goes and finds in a standard dictionary what's the right tax to be applied, and then verifies it, and then flags it if it's not correct. And typically for very, very large invoices, I'll need to know if the total is also correct, right? um, Discounts, taxes, all of those put together. So this agent needs to understand math as well. So it's just validating what's in the invoice. Then actually, the term invoice matching will come into play, where we need to figure out whether that vendor has is three-way or two-way. So the matching agent will first figure out the matching rules available in some system or in some human's head, codified, and say that these are the things I want to match against. These are the fields that are severe or they are of high importance. Here are all the POs associated with this invoice. Here are all the GRNs, and does all this matching together, and then actually tells back to the user that this needs a review or this is good to go, and all of that. So this agent is trying to do all the thinking that a user would have taken maybe few hours to do and a lot of domain knowledge to do. And then let's say everything is perfect. Now this AI agent also needs to go understand the chart of accounts, understand how this information is posted in the GL, understands exact heads, it's what expense head needs to go where, which line item needs to be split, where is there a capitalization that needs to be done, is there some amortization for a service that I subscribe for a year. All of that the is a bunch of AI co-pilots or agents which are going to do for you, and then actually do a GL post all along the way telling you what it is doing. So was I haven't even gotten to the cash outflow part that you talked about. I'm just okay, just to get invoice matching and fake and just duplicates right. You can have these
Yeah,
really
and I think
detailed
that's
ones.
quite a lot of heavy lifting, right? Which
Yeah,
humans would typically do until that point, like throughout the P2P process. And so
yeah.
I think it's also reflects to the one of the questions in the comments are around. So where is the human element in all of this? Like, is there somewhere that the human is looped into all this?
Yeah, so the human here is actually defining the guiding rules for the agent beyond all the data and the learning it has from the past, right? So it is trying to understand, let's say, configurations that has been set up in a software. It's going to interpret them. It's actually going to tell the user, hello, instead of you trying to match all the fields across all the documents, why don't you look at just two of these fields where there seems to be exception? So it is actually pointing the user and the human to where to look at. It is taking in any information that the human is giving through their actions or explicit feedback. So human is all throughout with this agent. So the goal of in none of these AI agents, which are finance or whatever, finance and accounting AI agents, is to replace everyone. It is to be a companion to these users. So you are, like Brian has been saying, speeding up things, making them very highly accurate, essentially bringing productivity gain, like a quantum jump in productivity gain. So yeah.
Right.
So I was just going to add, I mean, one of the things that's interesting when you talk about, AP and AR workflows is, again, from research, we're talking about potentially 80% is kind
Yes.
of the number that I'm seeing as far as what the AI agent can do. So kind of going to the question of, what happens, and again, hopefully useful. So I take a slightly different tact on things. So,
Mhm.
we think about, well, what are the people going to do, for example? Well, again, using one of my reference points is in the United States, for example, in 1900, 90% of the people were involved in agriculture. And 100 years later, 3%, right? So if you ask the people in 1900 and said, oh, only 3% are going to be in ag, you go, what are the other 87% of the people going to do? Well, we don't have 87% unemployment, right? And so what it is, it's a freeing element, right? Again, it's all the work that we could be doing, that we can't today because we run out of time. But if you can get a tool, that can do 80% of the work, that's where the human thrives, right? Is the exceptions, right? I mean, if we're matching, again, I always look at from a matching perspective, having a human look at two data points and say they agree, there's no ad,
Mhm.
right? All that matters is where there's an exception, right? And when, like you were pointing out, if it goes through the whole process and goes it's right, well, a human doesn't add anything by saying everything's right. It's those elements that are saying, hey, we think this could, again, from the pattern, this could potentially be fraud, right? Or we think the tax level's right? Because once you put in
Mhm.
rules of what's acceptable. So that's all I wanted to add is that's
Yeah.
kind of the numbers I'm dealing with.
Yeah, Brian, you mentioned fraud, and so I think that brings us to aspects around risk and security. Is that something that you want to comment on? Maybe even Nidhi can follow up on that as well.
I mean, just to put it from a user's perspective, that's one of the number one challenges to getting new technologies, and this is all new technologies, into the Office of Finance, because we are little c conservative, right? We're the fiscal agents, and so we don't want anything to go wrong. And so that's one of the number one questions that I get is, how safe it is. Now, I can say from a financial perspective, it's like it's safe, but I think you obviously can add a lot more need to, why is it safe and why can Brian actually say that to someone?
Got it.
Makes sense. How are we going to mitigate that risk?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm handing it on the tech side. So again, if I mean
So,
the
so
way I
from the
please,
tech side, I think it is extremely important to ensure that the user's data is protected.
Mhm.
So you have redaction, you have the right compliances, you have privacy aware models. You want to ensure these data sets are not looked at by humans. They are like on the software side, they are not kind of cross organization, no cross organization training and things like that. There are also early regulations in this space, essentially saying that every few months you throw away the model, redo it, and things like that. So there are very stringent methodologies taken on the development of the software or the technology side of things. My take is as long as we are transparent to the office of the CFO or the user in the CFO office, saying this is what is happening, this is how we are going to use your data, take explicit consent, and tell them everything that's going along the way, every one of you are receptive. The worry is when things become black box, right? So
right, because I mean,
Yeah.
oh, no, please. I was just going to say, I mean, part of the challenge, even going back to RPA from a couple of years ago, is from the security. And I always say, do you have a human doing it today? And they go, yeah. Well, again, humans don't follow rules. AI does. And so, just thinking from, as you were mentioning, the idea of, we're always worried about confidentiality. And so
Mhm.
the idea that the human actually doesn't see that anymore is a way to actually, again, make the CFO, he or she, feel more comfortable, because we're actually limiting the potential for something like that to go wrong.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, pretty critical aspect, risk and security around AI, and it's a recurring theme as well, right, across uh, people who are getting familiar with AI. Yeah, moving on. I think we have one last section on the adoption of agentic AI and the challenges that are inherent in it. So, Brian, how do you see adopting AI agents in in your FNA roadmap over, say, the next 36 months? Is that something that you're
Yeah,
thinking
I
of?
mean, I think part of it, we kind of jumped, which is no problem. Like we want to talk about what's interesting, is yeah. I mean, I just think it's the idea that again we're just going to be leveraging it to do higher and higher levels of work. I think you know
So,
one
so,
person to go,
so
please.
when you say higher and higher level, is your recommendation saying let's start with all these very heavy manual repetitive tasks, nail them, then maybe move towards say analytical tasks, and then further move to strategy, or
I do,
how are you thinking?
yeah, no, I do. I think you have to get wins, right? I mean, part of it is especially again, I'll put
Yeah.
finance out there, is we have to see where the benefit is.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the challenges that are before us, because we're good finance people, right, is we're going to quantify the cost, right? And it's a lot easier to quantify the cost than it is the benefit, right? Because I can go to the penny and tell you how much, buying software is going to cost and how much training is going to cost, and I believe something like, well, efficiency will go up, right? It's harder for me to quantify that. But I
Got
think where the benefit lies is if we, you know, knock out kind of that first and second tier activities and people become believers, right? Is that we're all three of us we're believers, but obviously there's lots of people who aren't, and to actually see that cost savings, because you can sit there and say, okay, this person, right, is now not spending an hour doing this process and is now being used to do something else that we think has higher value. That's how we can start quantifying it. So I think that's where the if you're asking about the roadmap, I think it's getting proof
Hmm?
that AI works, right? And
Yeah,
then once I
and
believe it, then I can think about how I might leverage it as we go up kind of the maturity curve. And what I was going to
mm,
say is take data entry on one point and strat planning on the other point, right? And
mm,
how do we get up that curve? And I think you have to build belief and confidence first.
got it. Yeah. So essentially, the idea is to pick tasks which are a lot of things being done. So we can have all these lot of um, tiny bit agentic AI agents who are trying to solve several small problems. Mm, and these are tasks which have a lot of things being done many number of times. So the quantum or the amount of productivity gain that is visible right up front becomes very obvious.
Yeah,
Because of that, we start gaining confidence, and all along the way, I am assuming we definitely will have very, very, very high accuracy. So across this process, I don't think there is any room for error.
yeah,
We Because I want to build the confidence, right? And it's finance, we have to be accurate.
yeah,
So these agents need to be highly accurate, but they start solving these problems which are taking away someone's a large chunk of their day. And then you start solving problems which is maybe a quarterly activity or a yearly activity or an activity of a leader in an organization, those kind of things.
right.
So yeah, that makes sense. So essentially high productivity gain in on various metrics, right?
Right. Because then, as I kind of discuss with people, finances, it's half calculus and half psychology.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with people, and change is hard. By definition, finance people are skeptical, and we want them to be. And so when we're making changes, which are now, I mean, the other thing that's coming in too, right, is
Hmm.
this has to be driven by finance, right? You have to understand what their pain points are. And if you can start solving their pain points, then that's where the trust, and then that's when they're coming out and saying, okay, and this is what I, again, experienced in RPA, but I'm seeing it today with AI, is like, once you solve a problem, it's like, well, what else can it solve? Right? Because
Hmm.
you have the belief now. It's like, oh, it really works. And then all of a sudden, you're, from my perspective, you're overwhelmed with potential work because all of a sudden they're like, okay, this is just, again, it's rules based, right? As long as we're following rules, it makes sense. That's where it thrives. You know, Again, you're talking about a higher level, which I won't even touch. But and then it gets driven to human judgment. So it's the idea of running it, as we talk about different kinds of budgeting schemes and seeing which one's more accurate. Because again, as a human, it's like, well, I can't budget three different ways, right?
Mm.
I take one that I like. But now if I have a tool that I'll sit there and say, okay, well, if we did this on activity based budgeting, and we'll look at top down budgeting, we'll look at bottoms up budgeting, then we will know, what, this methodology is more accurate. Now, the decision to go with it will still be human, but the analysis that you just were never able to do before as a function of time is now being enabled.
Yes, so I agree. At this point, the decision is likely to be human. I think some point we'll have sufficient confidence in technology where that decision is also recommended and then
Mhm.
then maybe taken on your behalf or something like that. But yeah, but we are far from it. I definitely agree on that. So,
So again, that's why I love having a discussion. It's a wonderful opportunity. So it's I don't know if you would agree with this, and that's what's fun, right? Is the difference between automating finance and having autonomous finance, right? So what you're talking about is then a level of decision making that we are comfortable saying that if this situation exists, this is the decision that we make. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, as long as it's all rules based.
yeah, so I think what I'm saying is, let's say you had a best friend who helped influence your decision, but at that point it is your best friend, as
Yeah.
against just a piece of software that is doing things which were just repeatedly done in the past, right? So it's because when the term best friend or a colleague or someone you know very very well is someone you will definitely bias your decision because you trust that person, right? So that's like you use two terminologies, automation and then autonomous.
Mhm.
I'm kind of going back to saying, okay, there's agentic, which is neither just automated nor just autonomous, it's companions. So
Mhm.
these agents are more companions. Yes, it's certain small processes we may trust them to make it autonomous. For certain other processes, we may just be wary and keep it automated. Some
Yeah.
places we'll be okay with recommendations. Of it, it may be okay with what is called, say, orchestration or experimentation. So
Mhm.
these agents are helping me figure out, should I do this or should I do that? Or in this case, I should do this. All of those combinations. So
Right.
these agents are helping me think faster and broader. I think the because it's a software and not a human, the breadth of information and maybe schemas are likely to be a little more um, thought through from a data perspective, not
Yes.
not necessarily from strategy perspective. But yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Great. Yeah, I think Brian, you touched deeply upon the human aspect of adoption of agentic AI, and then and the people aspect of it, right? Where adopting it and then challenges lying therein. Neither, do you want to very quickly? We have just another 6 7 minutes left. Do you want to quickly touch upon the feasibility aspect of it, like technically, how feasible would it be to implement this roadmap?
Sure, and I think a great question, right? So, feasibility wise, we have already started a while ago. Like when I say we, it's technology and softwares that have matured, right? So, predictive models have existed, forecasting, econometrics have existed, and they are being used for various tasks. End-to-end automation also now is in a for a use case is starting to get popular and kind of comfortable to build. Agentic AI, is because of its core capability, is at a place where we can start building these agents and deploying them uh, for uh, for the manual heavy repetitive tasks, for some of the analytics and actually reporting tasks, for having agents that can on the fly help me get insights based on data as well as unstructured data. We can also have agents that will guide me to understand what a certain thing means. Why is my let's say why is my AP health bad against someone else's? Those kind of things we can now build. So those technology capabilities are there. from a strategy point of view, which what Brian is referring to as very high level tasks, I think we are a little bit away from getting there. And very early on, earlier today, Brian mentioned hopefully cognitive skills, right? So now the core technologists are starting to understand what are the cognitive skills we can bring in into the technology. But from a practical use case perspective, we are a little bit, a few months or a few quarters away from even starting to POC those. But for the whole kind of spectrum from heavy manual tasks all the way to the forecasting, verifications, validations, what do you say, analytics, reporting, conversational analytics, understanding the data, all of that, it's the base technology is quite mature. So we very much can build very nice, robust AI agents as companions over here. And this I'm purely saying in the context of finance and accounting. I'm not talking about any problem in the world.
Mhm.
So in the context of a AP or a um, order to cash or expense management, because of the nature of the data and the closedness of that finance being, if I am focused on finance as vertical, I can build or we can build these AI agents that will do a really good job for us. So yeah, the technology is right out there. So
Super. Any reactions, Brian, to that?
No, I think it's absolutely correct. I think that not knowing the future on the tech side, it is, like I said, it is going to be, I believe, once people understand the the ROI that we're talking about, it will quickly be adapted. And so I put it in the context of, like, once people, people mocked the internet when it first came out, right? People kind of mocked, desktops, right? And then, like, the idea of trying to live today without it is inconceivable, right? I mean, again, you can do your job without a computer and without access to the internet, but everybody else can do a better job than you. And that's a little bit that's different in what I would call finance versus accounting, right? And again, obviously, we have two regimes between GAAP and IFRS, but just the idea that, in accounting, you have to be right. In finance, you have to be good. And so they're not the same thing, right? And so anything that you can do to leverage yourself to be, to better yourself and then ideally be better than your competition is, again, is the goal. And again, I really strive to make the impression upon people that I work with, is you have to assume that your competition is using AI today at a level greater than you are. And
mm,
so I think, as has been pointed out, is it's only going to take on more and more responsibility. But again, I'll say my little line from automation, assume we're saying about AI, but automation equals liberation, right? It's the same thing that AI does. It's like there's so much more that we can be doing that we're held out by because we haven't had the technology. And today we have it. And it's now just becoming believers, right? So as we're saying, the three of us are huge believers. It's helping, for me, it's helping my clients understand, again, how you really can leverage AI to increase, again, the profitability, the efficiency, the effectiveness, and job satisfaction that your organization, needs.
Yeah, that's a great summarization, Brian, of what we just discussed. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if there's any more questions left. Otherwise, yeah, I think we took most of the questions. Some of them are
yeah,
comments. Yeah.
I think there is just one which is very specific with saying,
Hmm.
would um, would these agents kind of just not understand and organize? How would the agents understand an organization's data?
Hmm.
Would someone need to feed it in? So the answer there is no. Actually, if you build the softwares correctly, that can start connecting to these various sources of structured data or
Right.
enterprise data, ERP, contracts, all of that. These agents actually have the capability of assimilating the information and then reasoning out of them and thinking out of them. So building useful softwares and technology with these agents requires some architecture thinking, but once that's done right, bringing in all the data, relevant data sources in, adapting the agents to understand what that data is doing is very helpful to make them extremely accurate and essentially efficient. So I think
Great.
Right.
just
I mean, all I would add is, again, it's just opening up the fact that you can bring external unstructured data into the decision-making process in, I say real time, but pretty close to real time. That,
Mhm.
again, we just, humans and Excel spreadsheets is just never going to get you there.
Yep. I think that's a great comment to close on. So
Great.
Deepak, back to you.
Yeah, I think that summarizes everything really well. We've answered most of the questions that we had here, hopefully in the audience satisfactorily enough. So yeah, it's been a great pleasure to have
Mhm.
Brian and Niyati be part of this discussion, lead this discussion today. And yeah, thanks everyone in the audience as well for being on this session. Thanks Brian again. Thanks Niyati. Yeah, and hopefully we have another discussion soon sometime.
Love to.
All right.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye
That
bye.
was a good chat.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.